Hello, this is a demonstration of global server load balancing with netscaler VPX within the software infrastructure. My name is Mark Owusu-ansah and I'm part of the software enterprise onboarding SWAT team. The basic agenda is we are going to be doing a demo. However, I've prepared a few slides here to hopefully ease us smoothly into the demo and give it some surrounding information that we may need for the demo. Basically, we have a brief overview of the features of netscaler VPX, how the GSLB is typically used within the software infrastructure, a sample configuration visualizer that shows how the global server load balancing, when it's set up, what it typically looks like, and the demo configuration that we are going to be using, and then we'll jump straight into the demo itself. Netscaler. The Netscaler VPX is a full application delivery controller for basically to accelerate performance for your applications, protect your applications, and then make your applications available. These are some of the basic features, and depending on the licenses that you have, are able to use all of them that you have here. You have your basic load balancing within the public and private network layer at the layer 4 level. You have layer 7 content switching. The load balancing, you have the basic ones as well as the global server load balancing. Application acceleration, SSL offloading, caching, DDoS protection, web application firewall, and many more depending on the licenses that you may possibly have. Within the software infrastructure, you are able to use a netscaler as a global server, use a global server load balancing feature of the netscaler. And typically what happens with that is you may have multiple data centers with netscalers that's already doing load balancing at those particular data centers, and now you want to further spread the traffic across the different data centers. So that in those cases, netscalers serve very well as a global server load balancer. You have that's one domain that's representing all the sites, and the domain is what your customers will usually go to, and then the data will be spread out to the various data centers. For that to happen, you need a platinum licenses with the netscalers. Each netscaler that will be participating in the global server load balancing. Also, the netscalers that will be used should already be doing a load balancing at the site. There should already be a load balancing virtual server in place already. And essentially, the feature of the feature of the global server load balancing is we have a domain, and when we hit the domain responds back with what should amount to the load balancing virtual servers at the different sites. So you go to a domain. If in this case we have an active mode, but essentially you just go to, when you hit the domain, it behaves more like a DNS, and then responds back with the IP addresses of the various load balancing virtual servers that you may need to go to retrieve your data. The various different modes, active, passive, or the various different modes that the GSLB could be set up in will determine how things work. But the basic essential capability is I hit a domain in my browser, and then the domain that comes back, I hit a domain, and then what comes back is a virtual server that should represent where the data is, and then you go there. As listed, you must have a platinum license to use the global server load balancing. And this is the basic configuration steps for the active mode. The active passive mode or the other modes may be different. In active mode, essentially all the sites are actively responding to data or responding to requests. So every site is essentially up and available, and it's just up to you how you spread your data around based on your configuration. But both sites involved in it should be ready to go and active and available. For that to happen, typically, even though it's possible to have just one VPX serving the purpose of one VPS in the configuration, typically you have multiple VPXs, one at each, one representing each site, and you have your, say, you have servers in Dallas and servers in Seattle. You may have your VPX seven, one VPX seven as a seven, a load balancing virtual server in the location it is. So you essentially have multiple VPXs, and then you sort of combine those to serve as and make up the configuration to serve as the global server load balancing configuration. Essentially, what has to happen for each site, enable the feature if it's not there. You may need to add an authoritative DNS service, or maybe a local name server on the particular on the particular netscaler that you are using. So typically the directions call for you to add as an authoritative names the ADNS service on a netscaler, and that serves as basically the same essential function. So depending on how you choose to do it, the instructions usually say create a ADNS service, but a lot of the times you can also just use a local name server, and they all basically serve the same purposes. Now, depending on the domain for which the global server load balancing is going to be serving, if it's not a top level domain and it's a subdomain, then you also need to make sure there's delegation from the parent domain with the necessary name server and SOA records as necessary. We'll not go into all of that at the moment, but we'll just come across those, and you may see how they work. Then you need to, for each one of them, you also need to create the sites, and the sites will be representing the local site and the remote site. You also have to create the GSLB services, the local and the remote service, and essentially each service represents the load balancing virtual server at the various sites or at the various netscalers. You create one GSLB virtual server, and you customize it. And by customize, the things you do is the GSLB virtual server represents the whole configuration, and you have to bind the services to it. You have to bind the domain that it represents, and then you have to customize the method of distribution, persistence, whatever policies you have. And once you do all of that at one netscaler, you basically go to the next netscaler and do exactly the same directions. Obviously, one netscaler remote in one site, it's going to be local at the other site. So that sort of thing. But you basically complete the same exact configuration, and when all of that is done, you synchronize both sites and both configurations, and then you go test it. That's basically what we'll be doing today, and so this is how it looks like. Right? We have a domain that's we send our request to. It's going to be called webservice.marco.com. That domain, there are going to be multiple. It's going to be one virtual server, global server, virtual server that's going to represent the different sites. You have a Dallas service, and you have a Seattle service. In the Dallas service, there's an ADNS service already set up there to basically be the authoritative response for a request to the domain. Similarly, we have another one. So essentially, there are two of them, both of them doing the same job, and both of them just responding to requests for the domain webservice.marco.com. In this example here, and as you can see, the Dallas will essentially represent the load balancing virtual server in Dallas, and then the Seattle will be doing the same thing for the server in Seattle. As you can see here, this is a webservice.marco.com This is a fictional example, but what would happen is if this were a real domain, then you also need to account for the fact that Marco.com initial request will probably go to Marco.com, and then therefore you have to make the necessary accommodations to make sure the Marco.com domain does the delegation, the various name server and SOA records. There are delegation. There's the necessary delegation to go to to the netscalers for anything that's webservice.marco.com. Okay. Before we go into the configurations, and I'll bring up the the control portal, and we'll look at some of the things. But this is the basic information that we are going to be configuring. The GLServer domain is going to be webservice.marco.com. There's going to be one GLServer virtual server. These are the sites, one in Dallas, one in Seattle, and these are the addresses. And these addresses are one of the each one of them is one of the static IP addresses that you ordered when you had the netscaler. When you did your initial load balancing setup, when you ordered the netscaler, there were some IP addresses that came along with it. These are the IP addresses that we borrowed, and I'll show you those in a minute. There are going to be the global GLSLB services, right? These are the services that will be linking to the load balancing virtual servers. And then these for each site, there's going to be the Seattle side. This is the netscaler, the private IP address and the public IP address. And that's what we are going to be using for setting up the ADNS service or the name server. However we decide to do it, we'll just do the ADNS for today. And also you have the load balancing virtual server here. And this is the addresses for them. You have the same thing for Dallas. So let's jump in right away. Okay, so this is the control portal, and what I've done is I've just filtered the netscalers. I've just filtered the devices on the netscalers, and we have two netscalers that we are going to be dealing with. One is there's one in Seattle, and there's another one in Dallas 9. As you can see, we need to know what the username and passwords will be for that. Okay, I may need to log back in there. Okay, but as you can see here, for this is the one in Seattle. We had the IP addresses when we first ordered Netscaler, and we are going to be borrowing one of them to use as a side IP. So this is what it's going to be, and this was the one I showed earlier on. And I have a cheat sheet here that we will just reference as we go along. Similarly, let me go back to the device list here. Similarly, there's going to be the same information for the one in Dallas. Again, you have the addresses, and we are going to be borrowing the second one here, side IP for GLSLB. Just putting some notes on there, so. And that's the address that we are borrowing for now. Now I've opened. Basically, you can go here and do a manage device, and that should just open up the GUI for the devices. Keep in mind that you do have to be in a private network to be able to access the devices themselves using the private addresses, as you can see here. Okay, so I have these up, and what I've done before we go anywhere is that okay, let's just log back in to all of this here. This is the Dallas VPX. There should already be load balancing happening there already. There should be within the load balancing. There should be a load balancing virtual server. Right. This is a load balancing virtual server that's already there, and that's already managing. It's already managing its own groups of web servers. Right. It's already managing web servers 3 and 4. Right. So we just come back here, and this is the load balance virtual server. The address is everything. It's already working, and all of that is fine. We'll look at the same thing on the other side. Let me log out and log back in here. Same way, you have the come up here, and then you check the virtual server. Virtual servers. It's the one in Seattle is also up and running with no issues. Just go in there. It's already handling load as well. Web service 1 and 2. So all of these are already set up. So before the global load balancing is just going to server load balancing is just going to spread everything around the different sites. So let's go back to it. So let's start with Dallas 9. This is Dallas 9. Before we start everything, we need to make sure the global server load balancing feature is enabled. You come up here. Okay. It is enabled. If it wasn't, you just simply check it and enable it. It's an advanced feature as opposed to a basic feature, so keep that in mind. Okay, so that's enabled. Next thing we want to do is we want to set up the ADNS service. So it's going to be the authoritative domain for any request sent to the netscaler. For the services, we just come up here to service, and we are just going to add a service. The service name will be ADNS in Dallas. Okay. And what we'll do here is we just use the same IP address of the netscaler. We could have borrowed one of the other IP addresses, but we use the same IP address, the IP address of the netscaler itself as the IP. Dallas, it's going to be 169.53.14.7. 169.53. 14 and 7. Okay. Yeah, the protocol has to be ADNS. Okay. Notice that the ADNS changes the port to port 53, which is the same port you do use for name servers. So it's just one way of instead of using the local name servers, we use an ADNS service, and that's basically it. You click it, and that's all you need to do for now. I'm done. Okay, so now we have the ADNS service up. Now let's go to the GLCLB stuff. Now, in lieu or as a replacement for setting up the ADNS service, I have used just setting up a local name server here, and it's worked just as well, as long as you set it up as a local name server. Just wanted to mention that. So those are different people use it differently. But anyway, so back to GLCLB here. What we need to first define is we need to define the sites. Okay, we have two sites, one in Dallas and one in Seattle. This is the Dallas environment. So let's first do the Dallas setup. we call it, and we call it here, let's see, GLSLB site Dallas. Okay, so post it here. The IP, this is the type, it's local. We're in Dallas, so this is local. The IP address is one of the static IP addresses that we borrowed. It's 169.53.53.53.73. 169.53.53.73. For now, we'll just keep the site IP and the public IPs to be the same. It's possible that you may have an internal IP for the site IP, and the public will be a public IP. They could be different, but for now we'll just keep it the same. 169.53.53.73. We do not have anything set up we don't have any other site name as yet, so no need to choose the parent. We'll just leave everything as is for now, and then create. So now we have the local site created. Now so let's add the remote site. Now the remote site will be Seattle. The type will be remote. The IP address will be 173.192.161.153. 172.161.153. Again, remember, this was one of the IP addresses that we borrowed. One of the static IP addresses that for that netscaler in Seattle that we borrowed for GLSLB purposes. 173.192.153. We could set up the Dallas as a parent site, and there's nothing wrong if you choose to do that. I'll do that for now, and then we create this here. Okay. Notice that the metric is down here because we haven't set everything up. It's enabled. The both of them are enabled here. We have the local. We have the remote. Now let's go to the services, and these are the services for the load balancing virtual servers. Okay, so we add one. Okay, and then the services, we have the service names here. Let's say GLSLB service for Dallas. The site name, the corresponding site name is going to be the Dallas site. The site type is local, and we use an IP based instead of the canonical name based. And then you have to select this is supposed to match up to the virtual server that's getting load balanced from the site. In this case, we already have the virtual server. We already know about it, so we just choose the web service, the load balancing virtual server in Dallas, and this is the correct address. We're still using the port 80, so we just everything looks good here. Click OK, and then done for now. Okay. Now we have to add the same service for Seattle. And this is the remote, and this is going to correspond to the remote Seattle load balancing virtual server. Okay, the site name has to be Seattle, and that shows remote. In this case, even though we're supposed to, typically if it were local, you see a virtual server showing up here. Because the virtual server is not known to this netscaler, it doesn't give you an option for that. But you can basically define a new server, and for the new server, you just simply type in the IP address of the load balancing virtual server in Seattle. Here's the IP address here: 173.192.161.152. 173.192.161.152. Public port is 80. So same information, the address has to be correct. You have to make sure this should correspond to the virtual server at the load balancing virtual server at Seattle. Okay, so it's created. Okay, done. Okay, it's up here. It's up. Notice that it's up here because you know the state is up and the state is down there, and all of these will be sorted out once we do the syncing or synchronize the sites. Now we have our sites, we have our services. Now we need a load balancing virtual server. This is the global load balancing virtual server, and this is basically the what holds everything together. The load balancing virtual server is going to be holding the services. This is what this is what's going to represent the domain that we go to for the request, and that's where the requests are going to be spread out to the various different services, local and remote. Okay, so we add the load balancing virtual server, and then we come up here. The name that we decided on is this here: web service GSLB. And as you can see, it's essentially behaving like just responding to DNS records. The type here is it's going to give back a record types. This is an HTTP stuff. We'll leave this here, and then when this, I'll probably want to check this one here. When this virtual server is up, send all active service IPs in the response. And this here usually you could, I'm going to check it, but basically says when the request does come in, the virtual server can respond with both of them if both services, or both services in our case, are up. Okay, so we just click OK. Now that we have the virtual server defined, okay, now we can change a whole bunch of things here. The method is least connection, which is fine. We can also always just change it to run robin or whatever we want. For now, it's going to be run robin. A lot of people do use RTT, but this is just one option of doing it. Okay. Now, what has to happen here is we have to define the services that a virtual server will host. Okay. So we come up here on the right side, service. There are no service bindings. We go in here, and then we select the service. As you can see, we have the service in Dallas and we have the service in Seattle. We'll select both of them. We bind both of them, so now we have two services. Now the next thing becomes, what domain is a virtual server going to be representing? Okay, we just choose this one here, and then we'll come up here. The domain will be the domain web service marco.com. And I'll just leave the default configuration is the same way as we have them now. Okay. So what we've done is we've bound one domain, we bound two services, and you can the other configurations that you can use. Typically, if you were in an active passive mode, you would define the backup virtual server for the master servers. In this case, both of them is active, and we don't have a backup at the moment. We just for the demonstration purposes, we'll just leave it as is. The main point here is we have a GLSLB virtual server. It has two virtual server bindings, service bindings, and we also have a virtual server domain binding. This is done here. Okay, and then we'll save things here. At the moment, you see one server is up and the other one is down because it doesn't have enough information about the possibly the remote server. At this point, we are done with all the configurations for one site. Now we need to go to the other site and basically reverse the same configuration. Where it used to be remote here, it's going to be local on the other side, and vice versa. So let's go back here. And I'm just going to open some of these things up just so it may help with configuration. Let's go to Seattle. Okay, this is Seattle. Before we start, same process. We have to log back in here. And if you can see, I'm not using the root IP address. That's because I've actually created an ID with a super user permissions, and that's what I'm using here. So that's an option instead of just using the default root that's been given when the netscaler is provisioned. Okay, so settings, system settings, advanced features, global server load balancing is enabled. So nothing to do here. We can just close out of this here. We need to go ahead and the same process repeated again. This time, we need the load balancing. We need to set up the ADNS service. So we come up here and add it. Service name will be ADNS Seattle. The IP address is essentially the IP address of the netscaler. That's what we decided on. The IP address of the netscaler will be 50.23.155.140. The protocol will be ADNS, and again you see that the port goes to 53. Sorry. So we save it, and it's up. Done. It's up here. Good. Now let's go to the GLSLB functions. Same way as we did earlier on. We'll go through the same functions again. We set up the sites. We set up the Dallas site for the Seattle site first because it's local. Okay. Let me just check this one to make sure that's okay. Seattle. Okay. Just want to keep the case the same so there's no confusion. This will be local at this side here. The address will be Seattle 173.192.161.153. 173. That's basically it. It doesn't know about Dallas. It doesn't know about the Dallas address or Dallas site. So we don't have the option of choosing that as the parent site. We can do that later on. Even though when we do synchronize the sites, it's going to always find that out. So let's create this here. Okay, good. It shows up metric exchange enabled. We go ahead and add the Dallas. This will be remote to the environment, remote to the one in Seattle. So IP addresses 169.53.53.73. It knows about Seattle, but we don't necessarily want Seattle to be the parent here. So we'll just create. Okay. Save this here. Okay. Still refresh also. So it looks like we managed to find the Dallas address. Anyway, so we go to services. Same way GLSLB services. We start the service name. We start with the first one. First one being Seattle. So we do Seattle here. Okay, it's local. It's IP based. We go all the way down, and we are supposed to be matching to an existing virtual server if you can find it. And we have Seattle here, so it populates it. Port still remains 80, and we go ahead and do this here. Okay, similarly, let's go ahead and add Dallas. The site corresponds to Dallas, and we need to, because it doesn't know about the Dallas virtual load balancing virtual server, we have to add it here. To add it, we need the IP address of the load balancing virtual server in Dallas, 169.53.53.72. Right. Public port will be 80. Same process. We'll add. We're done. Save here. Okay, and I refresh. Okay. Now everything is going smoothly so far. Now let's create the virtual server, and this is representing the same virtual server that we had on the other side, which is come up here. The virtual server is this. We are essentially duplicating the everything from Dallas, right? So we'll keep sending multiple responses in here, and then okay. We'll just change this to be round robin. Okay. Service. There's no service binding at the moment. Let's go ahead and add the two services. one now. We add Seattle. Okay, bind. And then we go back. And then we add Dallas. There should be two services bound to it. Good. Okay, two of them. And then what domain? The same domain that we had earlier on, which was the node domain, the domain web service.marco.com. Okay, bye. We don't change anything here. We don't make any changes here so far. Okay, and then done. Save. Refresh. Okay, it sees both of them. At this point, the configuration is done. You need to, let's go back to Dallas, and let's synchronize, make sure everything is synchronized. To do so, we go to GLSB. There's it says here synchronize configuration of remote sites. We want to force sync, and we want to sync. We are in Dallas. We want to sync with Seattle. And okay, we do it. Okay, it looks like it's all good. Now, what should happen? What should happen at this point? It's set up. So when we make a request to the global server load balancing to the domain, it should respond back with the IP addresses of the different virtual servers at Dallas or at Seattle. If it comes back with one, it should be able to come back with the other one in the next time. To test this out, the best way to do it, multiple ways. First is we can just do a name lookup, and for the server, do a basic name lookup. Okay, before we do a ping here, what I can do is I can change the PC, the local workstation, to have the name servers point to the netscalers, which are providing the ADNS services. So let's try that here and see how that works. Okay, so we go to the network properties, and then IP4 properties here. These are the DNS servers in use. We can change them. I am going to change these to correspond to the ADNS services, which are 169. Move this here so we can see them. This is 169. Where are they? 169, 53, 14, and 7. 169, 53, 14, 14, and 7. The second one was 50, 23, 155, 140. 50, 23, 155, and 140. Okay, so I'll save these here and close out of this here for now. What that means is that now when we do any attempts to do anything from for the domain, it's going to try to resolve it using the net name servers, which are the netscalers. And ideally what should happen is we should be able to get the virtual servers, the different virtual servers that we have. So let's for now test this here with this here with let's ping the domain, ping the web service microserver. Okay, and you see here response with one of them. one of the addresses 535272. That's a load balancing virtual server. Okay, and we do another response, another ping, and it should come back with the other one, right? So this is yeah, this is 72 and this is 152. So it is working because it's active. We expect to be able to use both of them at any point in time, or we should be able to get to both of them. And I did the round robin, so that's also helping. Change it again, and we go back to 72. Okay, we do it back, and then we go back to 152. So it's working in that regard. Similarly, if I do a name lookup, all right, if I do a name lookup and I do web service.marco.com, it should be able to respond back, and here again it responds back with both of them. This is essentially the global service load balancing in full effect and working without any issues. This is basically the presentation. So the main thing is, when you are done with the setup, you should be able to confirm with the you should see everything here, and they all should be working fine. I think this is adequate proof that everything is working. Now I have to remind you that if in a real world example, we also need to make sure that whatever the domain for marco.com does the delegation to the netscalers for the web service subdomain. That's something that has to be accounted for. This is essentially your presentation for today. Thank you.